Woody Johnson makes a major announcement, and the Jets sort of, not really back it up. We'll get into it today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, December 26th, 2023, the day after Christmas, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, today we're talking about some big news from over the weekend and a Jets victory. Woody Johnson, the team owner, right before Sunday's game against the Washington Commanders, announced that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas will return for the 2024 season. Then the Jets went out and won a game over Washington, 30-28. So a lot to get to today. First of all, I hope everybody out there had a wonderful holiday with your family and friends. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my background's a little bit different than it usually is. I'm in San Diego. I'll be here through the new year. I actually had a wonderful setup in my hotel room. I had a great view of the San Diego skyline. The problem is I couldn't make the lighting work to have it done that way. So this will be our background probably for the next week or so. So Woody, as I mentioned though, Woody Johnson gave an interview, an exclusive to the New York Post on Sunday morning before the Jets played the Washington Commanders. And he announced Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are coming back for the 2024 season. And through the first 2.5 quarters of the Jets win over Washington, I'm not going to say they necessarily vindicated the decision because it's a decision based on longer-term trends. It's a decision based on things that go far beyond a meaningless game between two bad teams in December. But at least the Jets looked good. At least you follow up a proclamation like that from your owner with the team looking like it's well coached, with the team looking like they're having a good game in a lost season. Then things kind of fell apart. And the Jets blew a huge lead. Jets blew a 20-point lead. It looked like they were on the verge of losing the game. Then they put together a drive at the end to win it. And I don't even know that it's necessarily they vindicated the owner. Maybe they just avoided embarrassment. And, these late season games are kind of weird, especially when you have two teams that are out of the playoff race. You always enjoy a win. I've never been a big person who believes in tanking for draft position. But after these games, I kind of ask myself, am I happy with the way the Jets played when you're out of the playoff race? When you're in the middle of the playoff mix, early in the season, the game against Philadelphia, the game against the Giants, you could say, okay, a win's a win. Get to late in the season, I understand, you still go away happy with a win, but I kind of ask myself, if the Jets play this way next year, would they win the game? Because these late season games have different vibes, different dynamics, especially when a team's out of the playoff race. A couple weeks ago against Houston, I was delighted by how the Jets played. The offense didn't do much in the first half. Defense dominated for 2 halves. Offense came to life in the second half. Jets dominated a really good team. For the first 2.5 quarters, I was very happy with the way the Jets played. Because in many ways, this game was a mirror image of what happened in Miami. It was like the reverse. Early in the Miami game, things snowballed on the Jets. Miami was making plays. The Jets were not. Early in this game, the Jets were making plays. Washington was not. You get the Tony Adams interception. Jets have to settle for a field goal. Then Jermaine Johnson blocks a punt. Jets score quickly on that. Jason Brownlee on a good pre-snap read by Trevor Siemian, beating the blitz, getting the ball out to him. Brees breaks a big run. 6 minutes into this game, it's 17-0 Jets. When I'm saying this game's over because Washington's not a good team. And you get into situations like this, especially against a team that's down on its luck. I don't think players show a lack of effort typically at the start of games, but you fall behind early in a game that doesn't mean a lot to you. You start making business decisions. Maybe you don't want to take the big hit. The game's lost, and it's not just that it was 17-0 6 minutes into the game. The Jets were up 20 with the ball in Washington's 6-yard line more than halfway through the third quarter, and still got themselves in a position where they almost lost this game. So maybe it was more about avoiding disaster than it was uh, delivering a victory, especially disaster in the context that the owner just went out and made a proclamation before the game that the coaching staff's coming back. Can you imagine like how Woody Johnson would have looked if Greg Zuerlein had missed that field goal at the end of the game? I mean, we would be having a different conversation right now. And by the way, this is if you ever own a pro sports team, if you ever find yourself lucky enough to be a billionaire, maybe this is why you don't make an announcement like that before a game, because you don't know how a game is going to go. But I think about a game like this, and another thing I ask myself is this the type of game you can build on? The answer against Houston was yes. This game felt more to me like the second half of Adam Gase's first season with the Jets. In that year, the Jets won 6 of their last 8 games. I felt like only 2 of them were really quality wins, though. They had a big win against the Raiders. They blew the Raiders out that year, and they beat a Steelers team that was still fighting for the playoff race week 16. The rest of the games that they won, they didn't really do a lot for me. Last week of the year, they beat Buffalo, who were playing their backups because they had already clinched the playoff spot. They eked by a bad Giants team. They eked by a bad, they blew out a bad Washington team that year. And there was a game that reminded me of Sunday's win over the Commanders in 2019. It was a game the Jets played at home against the Dolphins in December. And it had the same kind of vibe where the Jets, should have put the game away early. It felt like they were in control, and then they lost the lead, and they probably should have lost, but then they won it on a last-second field goal. It had that kind of feel to me. And I guess from as much as anything, I don't want to hear the Jets pound their chest after this win. I don't want the Jets to go in the offseason and say, oh, we won 7 games without Rodgers. Look, just think of how great we'll be next year. Because the Jets have a tendency to do that. They did that after the Gase year, where they won all those games in the second half. Take the win. Look, take the win. Wins are hard to come by in this league. Just take the win. But I don't want to hear the Jets act like they've done something amazing by winning 7 games this year, because this is one of the wins. So if you're going to point and say we won 7 games without Rodgers, yeah, you eked by a really, really bad team that game you probably should have lost, where you blew 2 20-point leads. So what I would say to the Jets is just take the victory and don't pound your chest over it. I was not happy with the way the defense played. I mean, the defense got torn up by Jacoby Brissett. Part of this is, if Washington had started Jacoby Brissett in this game, they probably would have won. Because Jacoby Brissett, who's a quality backup quarterback, a guy the Jets probably should have looked at for quarterback depth this year, he went out and tore this defense up. And if Washington had kept attacking, on their last offensive series, the Commanders had a chance to run the clock out. And they got very conservative at a point where the Jets defense could not stop them. If they had attacked, they may have gotten the first down they needed to run the game out. So I look at this. Look, you take the win. You always take a win in the NFL. But is this a game you take deep meaning from? Is this a game where you look back at the offseason and you say, wow, the Jets really grew with this game? I would say no. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn our attention to the owner, because Woody Johnson, before the game, as I mentioned, declared that he's bringing Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas back for the 2024 season. If you're an everydayer, if you listen to this show consistently, you know how I feel about that. But let's go a little bit deeper, because I think there are some things Woody Johnson said that deserve greater scrutiny. I'll tell you what they are, and we'll break them down as we continue on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. You should not have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime has last-minute tickets. They have flash deals. They have zone deals. And you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And I'm not just telling you about Gametime. I'm a customer. I've used it a couple of times back in the summer. I used it to go to the U.S. Open tennis, used it to go see a Broadway show right after Thanksgiving. Super easy to use. A lot of other ticket sites, they make you jump through hoops. Not Gametime. Gametime's 2 taps. You got your seats. And they have some amazing deals, last-minute deals. Maybe you forgot to buy somebody a Christmas gift. Maybe you got to rally late. Well, go to Gametime. Find tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater. Everything you could want is on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today we're talking about the events of the weekend. The Jets beat the Washington Commanders 30-28 at MetLife Stadium, a game that doesn't have a lot of meaning. I mean, a game that was played for draft position, it was played for pride, it was played for statistics, but both teams far out of the playoff race. Perhaps a bigger headline from this, at least a longer term, a headline that has longer term implications, is Woody Johnson gave an exclusive interview to the New York Post before the game on Sunday, which published Sunday morning, where he announced he is bringing Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas back for the 2024 season. And I've been very critical of Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, and I think they deserve criticism. I don't think either of them has done a particularly good job this year. But I decided to dive into the article because I'm not there every day. I don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And, if Woody Johnson's argument was, what, these guys have potential. They haven't done a great job this year, but I still believe in them. I still believe that they have the smarts to fix what's wrong. I could be talked into this. Well, Woody Johnson did not go in this direction. He began with saying, my decision is to keep them. I think we've had some very positive moves. The culture of the team is a lot better. The defense is better. The offense needs a few pieces. Okay, so there's one thing there that's accurate. The defense is better. Joe Douglas has done a very good job building the defense. Robert Saleh has implemented an effective defensive scheme. Can't argue with that. Good point. But the culture of the team is better. Your team is your team was one of the first two eliminated in the conference from the playoffs. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy in the NFL. Sometimes when a team's losing, the management will point to culture because it's impossible to prove. And they'll just use it as an excuse for losing. It doesn't matter we're losing. We're building a better culture. Well, what does that mean? I mean, have we not had players complaining of this season to the press? Have we not had, people critical of the coaching staff to the press just within the last 2 weeks? What does that mean? Like, can you describe what culture means? Of course you can't, because it's a meaningless statement. And this is the type of thing that drives me crazy. It's one thing to say, these guys need to get better. They've come to me with a clear plan. They have a clear vision. We're going to get better. These results are not acceptable. That's not what Woody Johnson's saying, though. Woody Johnson's out there making excuses for these guys. And, one of the things like I've been adamant about, which is clear, is this is not just about Aaron Rodgers this year. You would not be one of the first two teams eliminated from the playoff race in your conference if you were a quarterback away. Well, what's Woody Johnson say? Woody Johnson says, and I quote, just got to keep the continuity going with Aaron and the team we got. Well, what continuity? The guy played 4 snaps this year. Continuity? What on earth does that mean? The continuity? There's no continuity right now with this team. And Woody Johnson continues, like I said a year ago, we need a quarterback. We had a quarterback for 4 plays. Since then, we haven't been able to replace him. If we have a good quarterback, it makes everyone's job easier. It makes the line easy. It makes the line better. It makes the receivers better. Like, what on earth is he talking about? This is the problem, is like, if Woody Johnson can't be smarter than this, the Jets are going to have a tough time next year. Because I think what any objective person would say looking at this is, we got to build a better team around Aaron Rodgers. Aaron's 40. Aaron's coming off a serious injury. We can't expect him to fix everything that's wrong with this team. We got to build a better line around him. We got to give him better receivers. If we do, we have a shot next year. But this team's not good enough as currently constructed. And we can't expect Aaron to fix everything that's wrong because he's 40 and he's got a bad, he's coming off a very serious injury, an injury that impacts players his age tremendously. And that's not what you're hearing from Woody Johnson. You're hearing from Woody Johnson, this is all in Aaron Rodgers. It's all because Aaron Rodgers got injured. And by the way, one thing he glosses over here, he says, we haven't been able to replace him. Well, this isn't part of the plan of building an NFL team to try and get quarterback depth. Whose fault is that? I mean, this stuff is it's everything I would expect Woody Johnson to say. It's everything. It explains a lot why I don't respect Woody Johnson as a football man, because he's not being objective. He's not being honest he's not making an honest assessment of this team. Like, Aaron Rodgers is going to go out there and suddenly Randall Cobb's going to find the fountain of youth. I mean, suddenly this offensive line is going to be able to block people. Mekhi Becton's going to be good at left tackle. This offense is not good enough. It's not just the offense needs a few pieces. The offense needs pretty much everything. The offense has 2 good pieces right now. The offense has Breece Hall, who had a big game on Sunday, Garrett Wilson, who had a big game. Maybe you have some young guys with speed who can develop, but I mean, it's very limited slate of talent on the offensive side of the ball. You want to say Elijah Vera Tucker when he's healthy, you could say you have 3 pieces. That's fine. The Jets need to build an entirely new offense around Aaron Rodgers right now. I don't think anything Woody Johnson said is remotely accurate. I don't think anything he said is remotely fair. And when people ask, why am I so hard on Woody Johnson? It's because he's looking at this team saying, if we had Aaron Rodgers this year, we were a quarterback away from going to the Super Bowl. That's not true. That if that was true, you wouldn't be at the bottom of the conference. You wouldn't be out of the playoff race with 3 games to go, because the rest of the team, at least, maybe it wouldn't have been a Super Bowl team, but it would have kept you. It would have been good enough to keep you in the mix. This team was not good enough this year. And if you go into next season with this same team and Aaron Rodgers, the team will be better. Maybe you can sneak into a wild card, but you're not going to be a Super Bowl team. I'm so irritated by what I'm seeing from Woody Johnson. And it's everything I would expect Woody Johnson, to say. I actually liked what Robert Saleh said. Robert Saleh approached this with humility. After the game, he said, I'm always appreciative to get Woody's support. There's a lot of things we look at this season, and a lot of things we know we can do a lot better, and a lot of things we can learn from. We've got 2 games to finish, but with 24 looming, there's going to be a lot of excitement to go and attack this thing again. It's one of those things where obviously I can sit here and give you the reasons why I think I should be the coach, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of things I've got to reflect on and acknowledge to get better, not just with myself, but globally, and use this offseason to make sure we're attacking it in a way that gets us to a goal we can all believe in, which is a championship. I like that statement. And if Woody Johnson had addressed it like that, you know what? I don't know if I would have agreed with it. I probably would have had an issue with it, but not as much as I do with what he said. Because Saleh is showing humility. Saleh is saying, you know what? I messed some things up. I need to look back on my own, at what I've done. I need to get better. I like that. I do not like what Woody Johnson said. If you go out there and say, we didn't do good enough this year, but, and this is one thing I wish more owners would say, we didn't have a good enough season, but just because you have a bad season doesn't mean you necessarily have to fire everybody. People can learn, people can get better. Okay, that's understandable. I can't live with that comment, though, because it shows that the Jets aren't being realistic about where they are. The Jets have pieces to be competitive next year. The Jets have pieces. If they have a good offseason, they could be very good next season. But you have to acknowledge that things need to be fixed. And I did not see Woody Johnson acknowledging things need to be fixed. And I hope that maybe Woody's a little bit smarter behind the scenes than he comes off to the media. I doubt it. Maybe somebody behind him can talk some sense into him. I was very unhappy with the comments he made, though. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention past Woody Johnson. I can't talk about Woody anymore. We're going to talk about the last 2 games. Jets have 2 games left, both on the road. Thursday in Cleveland, next weekend, a weekend from now in New England. What's left to say this season? What's left to compete for? We'll discuss as we continue on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview, and that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Now, the Jets are not looking for a new head coach or GM this offseason. Woody Johnson's announced Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are returning. If they were, though, they might want to turn to LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn's not just another jobs board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. And hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. And they've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. It's the day after Christmas in 2023. On Sunday, the Jets beat the Washington Commanders 30-28. Team owner Woody Johnson also announced that his head coach and GM will be returning for the 2024 season. Now there's 2 games left in the year for the Jets. A game Thursday night against Cleveland, another Thursday night football barn burner, the Jets and the Cleveland Browns, although this game at least does have quite a bit of significance for the Cleveland Browns. And then a week from Sunday, the Jets play at New England. It'll be a matchup of arguably the 2 worst teams in the AFC to close out the season, the Jets and the Patriots. Maybe it's Bill Belichick's final game as Patriots head coach. Outside of that, don't think there's a lot of significance. You'll probably get the bottom tier broadcast team on CBS for that one. So what's left to watch in these final 2 games? Well, I think part of it's a question of how the Jets close this season out. Now, I think frequently we overestimate how significant the final couple games of a year are for a team. There's always talk about, can you build momentum going into the offseason? And probably 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really matter. I think one thing it's very easy to forget is there's 9 months between the end of a season for a team that misses the playoffs and kickoff of the next season. So how much momentum can you really build? Also, teams change over the course of the offseason. Players leave. Some players come in new who weren't part of the end of your previous season. So I think it's very easy to get caught up in this stuff. I think part of it's like we try and find meaning in any game, even if it's a meaningless game. So we're trying to talk ourselves into a reason for watching these games. But 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter. But I do think that there are some areas where this is significant. First of all, obviously draft position, and I guess it's kind of counterintuitive because if you're a tank commander, you want to see the Jets lose, whereas a lot of other fans just want to see the Jets win. I'm kind of somewhere between the two. I don't think there's a lot to be gained by tanking. I think historically, if you look, the Jets, as often as not, benefit from winning games because the player they would have taken with a higher pick if they had gotten it ends up being worse than the guy they ended up drafting. So I don't think it's anywhere near a significance to get a slightly higher draft pick. There are years where it matters. There are individual cases where it matters, but on the whole, it tends not to make that big of a difference. I think as much as anything, what I look for is, are there young players who are developing? And again, this is something that's very easy to get carried away with for a couple of reasons. Number one, the bar for rookies tends to be very low. If a rookie does anything, if a rookie shows any sort of pulse, people call him promising. I've seen this with guys like Justin Burris in the past. I've seen this. Elijah McGuire, guys who have a good game in December and suddenly they're the future of the franchise. It usually doesn't work that way. Usually these guys have isolated good games, just like veteran players do. You have a veteran player who isn't very good, who just has an out of context game, plays really well one week but can't sustain it. But I do think it's possible to see a guy begin a positive trajectory for a team. And that's what I'm looking at. I know Jason Brownlee had a touchdown on Sunday. I don't know that it was necessarily Brownlee. I think it was Trevor Siemian making a good pre-snap reading the leverages, and Brownlee just happened to be the guy he went to. But Jason Brownlee is a guy who I think should see a snap total increase because certainly putting Alan Lazard out there is not benefiting anybody. There's nothing to be gained from that. Xavier Gipson continues to get snaps. Is Xavier Gipson a guy who has a future on this team? I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much ability he's got. He had the touchdown return against Buffalo. He's had a couple of moments here or there. But if he is going to be a guy who has a future with this team, if he is a guy who's going to develop, these snaps might do him some good. It might be worthwhile to get him in there. Carter Warren at tackle. He's another guy who, I don't know how good he's going to be, but look, it's not like you're really downgrading at this point. The Jets players on offense are terrible anyway. Their starters on offense are terrible. So you might as well see what these guys can do in a game situation, but also get them reps, get them an opportunity to see the field. Izzy Abanikanda is another one. Well, let me give you an amazing stat from my buddy Michael Nani at JetsXFactor.com. Izzy Abanikanda now has more 10-yard runs this season than Dalvin Cook. Should it have taken him this long to get into the rotation when Dalvin Cook's out there? Look, we know Breece is really good. As much grief as Breece has gotten the last couple of weeks, you saw what happened on Sunday when the offensive line actually opened some holes for him. Breece is a very talented back, but you have an opening behind him. Who's going to be the guy who takes the carries when Breece is not there next year? And Izzy Abanikanda has an opportunity to get it in part because he's got that speed. And speed alone does not make a great player, but you can't teach speed. And speed added to other abilities can really give you something. Even if Izzy Abanikanda is only a number 2 back, even if he's a guy who only goes in when Breece Hall needs a rest, you need somebody to do that. Breece is not going to be able to play 100% of the snaps next year. So, it's one of those things you have to read as though it's the first chapter of a book. A guy going out there and playing really well at this stage of the season as a young guy, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a player for your team going forward, but it's kind of like the first chapter. If a guy's going to have a career, if a guy's going to turn into a good player for you and he gets out onto the field and plays well, that's the first sign that maybe there's somebody, maybe they're a player. And then you hope that they carry the momentum into the offseason program. That's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is training camp. Chapter 4 is the preseason. We won't know for sure until next year. And part of this, the Jets need to do a better job internally evaluating their own players. Let me give you an example of a guy they evaluated poorly internally. That's Bryce Huff, a guy who's been phenomenal as a pass rusher in the last couple of seasons. And they did not think he could be more than a pass rushing specialist. They did not think he could be a 3-down player. Well, he's showing you this year that he can be. And they made a lot of miscalculations about Huff. And I think if they understood what they had in Huff, maybe they would have done things a little bit differently. Some of the picks that they made in the draft, some of the players that they brought in, some of the signings they made in the last couple of years, like a Jacob Martin. Even I wonder if Will McDonald would have been their pick this year if they realized what they had enough. They need to do a better job evaluating these guys internally, and there's no better way to evaluate a player than in a real game situation. So these last 2 weeks will give the Jets a bit of an opportunity in that respect. And I'm trying to give you something to watch because obviously it doesn't make that big of a difference if the Jets win or lose. You're probably rooting for the Jets to win. I'd like to see the Jets play well, but these young players taking that first step, to me, that could be the most significant thing going forward, at least as far as these final 2 weeks go. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Tuesday, everybody. Send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we will have our weekly mailbag show. Until then, take care.